Okay, we're here with Kelly Daniels at the Kansas City Clay Guild. She will be doing a workshop on um, water
Water erosion.
doing designs with water erosion. So I'm going to turn it over to Kelly to introduce herself, and she will do her thing.
Right on. Hi, everybody. This is a super fun project that I learned umpteen years ago. I hate to admit exactly when I first learned it, but probably 30 years ago. The way I originally learned it was called shellac resist. But let me just give you a little bit of background about myself. I do have an MFA in ceramics that I received from UMass Dartmouth, and I also have a BFA in ceramics from Chico State University. But I first started working with clay, like I said, about 30-ish years ago. So I have a lot of knowledge, but I don't know everything. So I love questions from anybody who happens to be in the room here at the Guild tonight, and I'm happy to answer all those kind of goodies. So again, the way I learned this was called shellac resist. Water erosion is one term. Hydroabrasion, if you want to be extra fancy, is another way to think about it. But let me just show you really quick. This is a piece that has gone through the bisque. Where I have applied the resist, and then I've gone and washed it away. Washed away everywhere where I did not have resist, and it leaves this beautiful relief texture on here. So that's what we're aiming for. I happen to have glaze in here because I'm getting ready to put it in a kiln load. There are a number of different products that you can use as your resist. The traditional resist is using shellac. Shellac comes from the lac beetle, who exudes this resinous material, I think, in their, I don't want to say nests, but in their pupating form or something like that. At any rate, if you happen to be vegan, shellac may not be something that you want to use if you don't want to use something that comes from an animal. I'm not, so that's not a problem for me. But other products that you can use if you're not interested in using shellac are products like gel medium. I happen to have this triple thick brilliant gloss sealer, Mod Podge. And then I've heard of people using Future Floor Polish. I have not used that myself, so your miles may vary on that. And I might touch on a few other things as I get into it. I primarily have been using, for my work, this acrylic latex brand, Liquitex brand, gloss, medium, and varnish. I think the main reason that I moved to using this is because I wanted to try something and I didn't happen to have shellac available. So I was like, well, I wonder what would happen if I tried this. I like this product, and it would be the same for using Mod Podge or some of these other mediums. I like that I can just dip a brush in it. It's water soluble. I can rinse my brush out in water, and there's no aroma or anything. So that's why I use this. But any kind of acrylic polymer kind of product could work equally well. Now, there's a couple of considerations when you're using the product. It just really depends on what you're looking for. If you use a shellac resist, the shellac might be harder, as in it might dry harder and provide more resistance to the abrasive nature of the erosion process, as opposed to the acrylic medium. So what I'm going to tell you is the kind of clay that you use for this process matters. You want a really fine-grained clay. I prefer porcelain. I happen to have a pot right here made out of Cone 10 B-Mix. I'm going to demo my painting process on the B-Mix because it's kind of what I happen to have. And I'll go ahead and do some erosion on the B-Mix. But the thing that's really nice about porcelain is it's super soft in the slightly moist to bone dry state, and it erodes away really beautifully. When you start getting into porcelaneous clays and porcelains, they're just tougher and hard to erode away. It just takes more work, and you'll have more of a tendency to have problems accidentally eroding away the actual resist medium. So if you're a guild member, if you're coming in here and you're buying clays from the studio, we have a domestic porcelain. And I may or may not have tried this with the domestic porcelain. I don't really remember, but what I'm feeling is that it's not easy to erode away. So if you happen to come in for that type of porcelain, it's sort of not really a true porcelain. My favorite porcelain to use is Cone 10 English porcelain from Laguna, but I also love frost porcelain at Cone 10, but also I love frost porcelain at the mid-range level as well. So if you're a guild member, we do, or you're just coming to purchase clay here from the guild, we do carry the Cone 10 V-Mix. So that's another option for you. So the way that I get a design onto my pot, you can draw a design onto your pot with a pencil if you like. I have a tendency to not use pencil as much. It's probably not a problem. I see other people using it, but what I know about the graphite is sometimes there's like a little waxy residue that can be left in the graphite that can resist some material. So I just tend to not use a pencil, but you totally can. What I really like to use to draw on my pieces is just to take some food coloring, drop a couple of drops of food coloring in a little container, add a little bit of water. Whoop, you probably can't see that. I don't want to spill it out. And then I just take a fine brush and I start to draw my design on here. So for the purposes of this, I'm going to try not to make it too intricate. If you have more water and less food coloring, I think I actually have a little bit too much water in here. I'm going to dump it. Then if you have too much water versus food coloring, your design work will kind of bleed out into your clay. That's not really a big deal if that happens. I'm really just doing this to give myself a guideline for where I want to apply my latex resist or my shellac. So with the shellac and the way it dries, it's probably going to be your hardest drying product compared to using an acrylic polymer type of medium. And the reason that that is a good thing to know is it really depends on how finely detailed your designs are going to be. If you're using broad brush strokes, large areas, you can be a little bit more aggressive with your erosion technique. And if you're using really fine line, more detailed work, you're going to want to be a little bit more careful about how you scrub away the clay. So depending on your needs, you may want a resist medium that's going to dry harder than the others.
Quick question,
Yeah,
Kelly.
go for it.
If you're using a shellac resist rather than what you have, do you have a particular brand? Is it like an artist shellac or just what you get at the hardware store?
Just whatever you get at the hardware store is fine. what I've heard about the shellac that you get pre-mixed in the can is that it can have a shelf life, which I think is more crucial to woodworking. In terms of, I guess, after it's sat for a while, it gets, like when you try to apply it to wood, it gets kind of gummy. I honestly can't speak to that with its use on the clay after it's sat over time in that container, because I just don't use it. But you can buy shellac flakes. So you could just mix up a tiny little bit at a time. And I think the shellac, I think you can dissolve it in a couple of different things. I think you can dissolve it in denatured alcohol, which is a little bit more toxic and smelly. But I also think you can get an anhydrous isopropyl alcohol, which is an alcohol that has no water in it. And it's a lot more user friendly with like no aroma and stuff like that. But again, it's been so long since I've even used shellac that I think one of the reasons I stopped using it was just I didn't want to smell it. But again, I haven't used it in so long that I don't even remember how much it smells. I just know that I like this product. It works, for me. And so, I don't actually use this a lot. It's a really fun process and I really like it. But if I were going to make this primary component of the work I do, I might actually turn back to using shellac. I've seen other people use different combinations of, I don't know, taking like a hard wax and mixing like, I don't know, some petroleum product in with it that helps it to be more brushable. But I don't know if it's like toxic and flammable. It's just like what worked for them, and I don't remember. But you might come across that in your research and see somebody using a product like that. You can also use other materials for resist as well. So I've heard of people using packing tape. You could use pinstriping tape. You could use masking tape. You can also use like an adhesive vinyl. This apparently is from a company called Oracle, is what it's on the back side. I think I just picked it up probably in the clearance bin at the local craft store to use in my die cutter, and I actually haven't done that too much. The trick to using that product is getting something that's going to be tacky enough that it can stick to the bone dry clay. So if we have time, I'll play around with that. I'm saving 1 cup to put this on, and we'll do some of that. So then, did I get this is the brush I'm looking for. Sorry, it's here. I'm looking funny. It's all good. I know. I'm a sound effects person, so I might make weird, funny sounds. So I'm getting ready to use the gloss medium. And I also like to put a couple drops of food coloring in this because out of the bottle, it's clear and it can be hard to see what you're doing. I could use a contrasting color, which would be kind of nice so I don't lose my red lines with my red color, but no big deal, no harm, no foul. And then I'm going to choose whichever brush, serves your purpose. I tend to like to use these Sumi brushes. They're kind of inexpensive, so I don't have to worry so much about like ruining my brushes. But you could use a variety of materials to apply your design. So I could use, a flat, sharp chisel type of brush just to make square marks. I could use a really large fat brush to, apply broad, large brush strokes. You could take a sponge stamp, either a sponge that you kind of carved into a stamp, or I don't know if you can get stamps that are shaped already, but you could sponge designs on. So that could be kind of fun, especially if you want to be more free form and abstract in your presentation. I meant to put some paper on the table so I wouldn't drop that on the table.
Do you want any?
Nah, not at this point.
Yeah.
I think I'll be okay. Actually,
We'll
you're
all
right.
survive. You do?
I have some stuff right here.
Oh, okay.
Here you go.
Perfect.
There you go. All good. All right. So we'll get this on here. At this point, drawing this on is a little bit like watching paint dry. But we'll get this going, finish it up so that I can actually wipe some of this back a little bit, and we'll see the difference on how it erodes versus the porcelain. So the different materials are probably going to dry at different rates. So if you were using a shellac, the recommended drying time for shellac is 24 hours. The harder your resist material is, the drier it is, the harder it is. It's kind of incorporated itself into the clay. So this kind of soaks into the surface of the clay a little bit. And when it gets nice and hard, you're going to have a sharper edge and an easier time washing the clay away without abrading the edge of your design element. That being said, I tend to be an impatient person. So when I'm using my gel medium, I might do anything from applying this the day before and waiting to, look, I got this on here half an hour ago while I was watching a show on TV, and now I'm going to start eroding it away. I find that this gel medium on the bone dry clay actually dries pretty quickly. And I'll usually work in series, so I might have 10 pieces sitting in front of me, and I will start applying my design to the pieces sequentially, and just depending on where I'm at, maybe after I've applied my design to 5 pieces, or maybe after I've applied my design to all 10, I will go back then to the first piece that I've applied the medium to, and test it out and see how it feels. And usually I can get away with starting to wash the clay back without too much of a problem. Especially if I have something that's less detailed. So it's kind of like you need to experiment with it and start playing around with it. There isn't any one right or wrong way to do this. It's really just, guidelines to lead you down a path of discovery. Another thing that's fun about this process, so that I keep talking about interesting information instead of just painting away here, is you can do multiple layers of resist. So say I've got this first layer on here, and then I wash back the clay. I can go back in again and paint over another design element on top of what I've already worked on, go back in and erode that away a second time, and now I have multiple layers of information on my piece, which is kind of nice. The fun thing about doing this with porcelain as well is you can achieve some really beautiful translucency, because as you are eroding the clay away, you're making that piece thinner in those areas. So if that's something that you're working towards, it's a really beautiful process. Something like bead mixture, you would be using this more for a textural element. Let's see. I think what I'll do is I will finish one more petal on here and let this set up so that I can move on to another element of information. All right, so I have one spot that I haven't finished. That's okay. I'm not going to worry about that for right now. Maybe I'll come back to it later or let somebody else work on it. Another thing that you can do is actually apply color to your piece at different stages. So what I have here is a porcelain cylinder that I threw. While it was still bone dry, I applied a black slip to it. I created this slip by using my base clay, the slip slop that's left over in my bucket, and I added black mason stain to that. I usually use mason 6600, and I use about 10% stain when I'm doing this. You always want to have an extra container of water so that you can rinse your brush off and not let that gel medium sit and clog up your brush. While I'm talking about this slip, I'm just going to do a really simple design pattern on this. Otherwise, we will be here all day. So as far as using a colored slip, on this one, like I said, I'm just using black that I created with a Mason 6600. I'm not pre-drawing my design on here. I'm just going with a super simple pattern so I can save time. You can take your throwing body, your clay, and dry it out and then actually weigh it out so you can figure out what your dry weight in grams is, and then you can rehydrate that clay and add your mason stain. And I usually use about 10% for the black. You could also try using underglazes. The trick with underglazes is if you let them dry to bone dry, depending on the manufacturer and even the color within a particular manufacturer's line of underglazes, you're going to find that the thicker coats of underglaze, if you have multiple coats because you really want heavy coverage, if you have multiple coats of underglaze and you let that dry to bone dry, that underglaze is going to be really difficult to wash away. It has ingredients added to the commercial product that cause it to be very strong when it dries. So it's really hard to wipe away. Another a consideration that you could do is you could apply this to I would say somewhere between leather hard and bone dry, not so that it's still as wet as leather hard, but if you still have some moisture in your piece so that that underglaze does not dry completely to a really hard state, you would have a better result in washing that underglaze away. But when you use the same porcelain body, and you already know the qualities and consistencies of the clay. So this is going to wash away just as easily as it would without the left brain, right brain. Sometimes my right brain and my left brain don't work together. So this will just wash away really easily, just as if you had no colorant, no stain in the clay.
Kelly, I have a quick question
Yeah.
from a viewer. As you're drawing out the resist, how fine or detailed are you able to get?
You can get pretty fine. What you'll need to be aware of is your eroding technique and how you erode it so that you don't wipe away that fine detail. It is harder the finer you get in your detail. And if you were going to do something that was really finely detailed, you might be using shellac. That might be your trick, because shellac is going to be harder to wipe off the surface. But you can see on this piece right here, I don't know if you had a chance to see that at the beginning, but this is really fairly fine. That's so awesome. I didn't realize that we had interactive
Robot hands?
no comments coming through.
Oh, yeah.
But actually, I remember that now. I remember making comments online. I just forgot that was.
But also robot hands.
That was a thing. Yeah, robot hands. That's so great. I like that. Other fun things that you can do that I'm not going to demonstrate just because I don't really do it in my own work. But what can be fun if you're wanting to add color to as an element besides just having the color on the surface is, say I'm just going to wipe this away on a bare clay with no colorant. I can then go back after I've eroded the clay away and created the surface, and I could brush in, say, an underglaze at that point, and that underglaze would then go into the recesses, and I could wipe it off the surface of the resist area. That's a little bit hard to imagine just verbally. But what I can do is I can drop some names of some artists that I really like that use some different techniques in their process that actually show that. So one artist that does that really well, his name is Jim Gotuso. And I'm not sure how active he is on social media, but if you type him in, he works with porcelain, and I think he works mid-range.
Would you spell his last name?
It's Gottt, so two T's, Gottusso. And he used to blog under a blog called Sophia's Dad's Pots. So that's another way to find him. But he'll do multiple layers of shellac resist design work, and then as his final process, he will inlay and underglaze into the deepest recessed areas, and then wipe back.
I found his blog. I'm linking
Sweet. Can you actually link that and show that in the comments? Oh, that's perfect.
Yep.
Sweet. I was thinking about that because I was originally like, oh, I'll write all these names down on the chalkboard. I'm like, oh, and then I forgot about it. So that's perfect. Another artist that I like is Erin, Erin, Erin Furimsky. So Furimsky. And she's got some videos through Ceramics Arts Daily where she does some fun techniques. She'll use a sponge and either a colored slip or underglazes, and she'll actually sponge a design onto her pot first, and then she will put her resist design on top of that imagery, and then she'll wash away everywhere where there isn't a resist, and she'll get this fun play between her stamped image and the recessed pattern. So there's really no limit to all the fun that you can have with this. Now I'm going to holler at someone, perchance Ricky. Would you mind dropping this in the dry cabinet for me? Since I just did this, maybe in the next 20 or 30 minutes, it'll be good to go. So I don't want to wash this off with my washing water. All right, so then as the magic of the cooking show goes, we have this piece ready to wash, with the exception of, we'll see how this goes, because I forgot to do this one little area right here, and I did it when I walked in, so maybe I did it about 30 minutes ago. So I'll start washing away some of these other areas, and I'll try to remember to save that one for last. Whether or not I can remember that, we'll see. I am actually going to grab a taller stool, I think. We'll see how that works. Hopefully it's not too tall and I'm not like too much out of the scene. I just realized that I can't like really reach up into the water from the short stool, so. Rearrangement is the name of the game here. Okay.
If you can move the water bucket over this way a little
That
bit.
works a little bit.
Yeah.
So I have a bucket of water, and I have a sponge, a nice, relatively new sponge. You don't want to use your old sponge. Sorry. And it's nice to have 2 sponges in your water, because then you can drop one in and let it rinse out while you grab a second one. And then I also have a second bucket of water, because what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to be able to change your water frequently. This might be enough clean water for this one pot, but I might actually need to change it out. So let me think about this for just a second on what I want to tell you. What I want to tell you is you're going to want to wring your sponge out. You don't want it super wet and soggy, but you don't want it super dry. With the bone dry clay, especially porcelain, porcelain in its bone dry state, for one, is the most fragile clay that you can work with. So you want to be careful that the way you hold it, you're not going to accidentally crack it. But if you were to put too much water on here, it's basically the way we slake down clay and rehydrate it. Is if you take a bone dry clay and you put water on it, it just dissolves pretty instantaneously. So we don't want to put too much water on it, and we don't want to stay in any one place